Hello, I'm Andrew Cooper, and I am the owner and publisher at Horrific Scribblings, and we are working on bringing you the anthology Extremely Weird Splatter, which will collect short stories that combine extreme horror and splatterpunk elements with elements of weird fiction or weird horror. And this is the last week that we're accepting submissions. The deadline for submissions is May 15th. And soon after that, we will be putting together the final table of contents. So pretty soon we'll have a complete book that will be going into production. And in this video, I'm going to talk about how Extremely Weird Splatter relates to the mission of my company, Horrific Scribblings, which is to seek out and publish transgressive dark fiction. And what do I mean by that? What is transgressive dark fiction? Well, transgressing, the trans and gressing, those two word parts together basically mean crossing boundaries. To be transgressive, fiction has to do something that crosses a line that's not supposed to be crossed. It has to do something unacceptable, according to most people. It not only has to venture outside of the mainstream, that's most people, it has to challenge the mainstream, and it has to break up people's assumptions. And so splatterpunk is inherently transgressive. It was born to be transgressive. That's the punk in splatterpunk. If you think about punk music from the 70s, it's countercultural. It's getting in people's faces and saying there's something wrong with society. There's something wrong with culture today that youth is going to stand up against. And so splatterpunk is going to do something to undermine mainstream assumptions, mainstream norms, and mainstream values. And while lots of horror can be transgressive, and Horrific Scribblings publishes transgressive fiction of all sorts in our archive of short fiction and some poetry, Horrific Scribes, one of my motives for starting the company was my own increasing interest in writing splatterpunk. I had specifically written a novel called Alex's Escape, and I frankly thought that nobody in their right minds would publish it because it not only breaks mainstream rules for what fiction is allowed to do, but it even breaks rules that most splatterpunk authors tend to follow when they're putting together their masterpieces of gore and depravity. So I figured I'm going to have to publish this thing, and I had published some books myself before, and I thought, you know what, if I'm going to keep publishing, I should have a company, and I should start publishing other people too. So that's how Horrific Scribblings came to be. It was kind of born out of splatterpunk, and now my company's been around for over a year, and we're publishing our first professional rate paying collection of fiction, Extremely Weird Splatter. And so it makes sense that I'm going back to those splatterpunk roots. And that book of mine that I mentioned, Alex's Escape, is unusual within splatterpunk, not only because it goes too far, but it's also weird. It has elements of a weird fiction. There are cosmic entities involved. I won't say more than that. And the tradition of weird fiction, and perhaps new weird fiction even more so, has always been about inventing and recombining tropes and conventions to create horror that defies mainstream expectations and reinvigorates horror traditions. So like splatterpunk, weird fiction is a horror outsider. It is transgressive. So horror fiction has in some ways always drawn outsiders. Since the 18th century Gothic, mainstream authorities have regarded scary fiction and its readers as highly suspicious and perhaps dangerous types of people and fiction. Horror communities have always tended to involve people who are weird in the more general sense of that word, and like horror involves fiction outside the mainstream, it involves writers and readers who are outside of the mainstream. So horror history is full of outsiders. And so, perhaps not surprisingly, Extremely Weird Splatter is too. The authors have different types of outsider perspectives that they're bringing in. The book of mine I mentioned, again, Alex's Escape, is an outsider among outsider splatterpunk works. because it's not just uber violent in some unacceptable ways. It's also queer. It has queer characters and a queer perspective, and in addition to having a queer editor, that's me, Extremely Weird Splatter, also has at least two queer authors signed up, or if they don't identify with the word queer, they're at least somewhere on the LGBTQ plus spectrum. And I think this is not a coincidence. Queer, weird, being outside the mainstream, transgressing against the normal. All of these ideas are closely connected. And so when I chose the tagline, splatter the normal for Extremely Weird Splatter, for I was trying to capture how the book reflects the mission of Horrific Scribblings, its focus on transgressive dark fiction, the mission that is queer, that is weird, that is punk. It's about saying fuck you to the mainstream and maybe making the mainstream like it while you say it. With every body broken to bits in the stories in this book, the book makes normal a little bit weaker. And that's good for all of us, queer or otherwise. If you wanted everything to be normal all the time, would you really be a fan of fiction that goes to uncomfortable places? No, you like horror because you like things that aren't normal. So get ready to splatter the normal. Get ready for extremely weird splatter. And if you don't mind, think about giving us your support. So get ready for the book and help us out and keep the excitement high because there's more news to come soon.